there's a lot of concern about what leaving the EU will mean for the city. Do you have a view of how it will change? Will we see a much smaller city, a very different city, a bigger, more thriving city? What's your take on what happens?
So my guess is if you look 25, 40 years down the road, we'll look back and say, didn't actually make a lot of difference, did it? And I say that for two reasons. One is, one of the things that's, I think, overlooked in this whole Brexit discussion is that we're always looking at it from the perspective of the UK. Look at it from the perspective of the EU. The EU faces two existential problems. One is the future of the euro area, and the other is migration from outside the EU into the EU. The first one threatens the whole project of monetary union, and the second one threatens the principle of the free movement of people and the Schengen area. British membership of the EU is not an existential problem for the EU. The two problems I've mentioned are the important ones. The UK is in neither the euro area nor the Schengen area. So the idea that the UK can sort of lead this, frankly, is just silly. It's not going to happen. And I think the difficulty for the UK and the whole of this debate was that, first of all, we don't know what the EU will look like in a few years' time. So it was a bit odd that we were the country having the referendum. You know, it would have been just as plausible for the UK government to say, look, let's just wait. If they go down the path of political union and they really make the transfer union work, then what's the point of being in a club which is going to be dominated by all the big countries that are in the euro area that have an incentive to structure financial regulation, every other aspect of the treatment of financial services around this one currency, and we're not part of it. On the other hand, they could come to the conclusion that at least some countries may have to leave, and the recognition that the EU will always be comprised of some countries in a single currency and others not. That might be an EU which would feel much more at home and comfortable. Why make the decision now, but what we have? So I think it's going to be very, very hard to judge what the future holds. But if you look at the basic strengths of the city, which is it is the European financial centre for this time zone, it's always had enormous links to the rest of the world, not just to the euro area. The euro area is not a very successful part of the world economy at present. We have very big activities, not just in banking, but in fund management, insurance, legal services. Many of these won't be affected by being out of the EU. And if people want to do business with each other, what's not obvious to me at this stage is why being out of the EU is going to totally transform the economics of why these people want to do business with each other, and ways will be found to make sure that that's possible. So I don't see London losing its role as the financial centre of Europe. After all, a lot of people said that would be the consequence of our not joining the euro area, and that turned out to be completely false. And in some ways, that's a more important part of the problem than being in the EU.